It's week 11 and it feels like a tough week at receiver. But Tom, before we dive into our rankings, I want to know, how many wide receivers do you truly feel comfortable with this week?
Yeah, we're definitely getting that point in the season where it becomes a little bit of a headache at times, and you look down and you go, right, well, who am I feeling really confident in? And it kind of gets down to about wide receiver 20 range for me. Once I get past Stephon Diggs, who I've got in my wide receiver 20, and you look at Juwan Jennings, Marvin Harrison, Romeo Dubs, Jordan Addison, like all of those guys, we know they can pop, but there's enough of them that are been difficult at times. I mean, Juwan Jennings has had down weeks. Marvin Harrison has been very volatile. Romeo Dubs is coming off a chest injury. And Jordan Addison is also very up and down and didn't clear 40 passing yards last week.
Yeah, it feels for me, I'm the same. I've got 18 written down. It's basically our S tier, our A tier, and then it's a little bit of a coin toss. But rather than talk about it, let's dive in. The S tier, we have got Jaxon, Smith-Njigba, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Puka Nacua, Drake London, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Rashee Rice, and Jalen Waddle. Tom, Jaxon Smith-Njigba has been arguably the fantasy MVP. He is the wide receiver 1, averaging 21.9 points per game. But the Rams, playing all of that dime personnel, are a little bit of a tough matchup for wide receivers. What do you think this week?
Well, they are, and they rank top 3 in pass defense and EPA. But when it comes to fantasy points, they've allowed the 9th most because big kind of push teams. So teams end up getting there. This game's got a 49-point over-under. But JSN, like Jacob Gibbs put this out on Twitter, but like what we've seen from JSN, weeks 1 to 4 in yards per out run, 4.19, weeks 5 to 8, 4.48, and then weeks 9 onwards of what we've seen so far, 6.53. Like he just is getting better and better. He's one of only 3 wide receivers ever to average at least 75 receiving yards in each of their first 9 games in the season. And I truly just think we've seen somebody ascend to the top tier.
100%. One player that has also ascended to this top tier since the Tyreek Hill injury is Jalen Waddle. He has been phenomenal since Tyreek Hill went down. Tom, another week continuing it and expecting nothing else?
Yeah, and it helps that he's going up against the Commanders at home. Like the Commanders are just really stinking up the joint. Their defense is falling apart. They've allowed 5th most fantasy points on the year. They rank 32nd in pass defense EPA. They lost Marshawn Lattimore, who wasn't even playing particularly well. But for a guy in Jalen Waddle who's just really ascended since Tyreek Hill went down, this feels like an absolute smash spot.
And then in the A tier, we have got Justin Jefferson, Emeka Egbuka, Nico Collins, Ladd McConkey, Devontae Adams, Devonta Smith, George Pickens, Zay Flowers, T. Higgins, and Roman Dunze. Tom, Justin Jefferson is currently the wide receiver 13, averaging 14.7 points per game. That is not what you would expect. And he has dropped into our second tier. Do you think that this is potentially a squeaky wheel game when we're going to see JJ McCarthy force him the ball and potentially him catch it this week, rather than the very, very low 50% catch rate he has seen since JJ McCarthy became the starter?
Yeah, it's been bleak for Justin Jefferson. Like he's had only 7.7 points against the Ravens, which easily could have flipped if he'd managed to catch the ball that turned into an interception. But the touchdowns just aren't there, and we've said previously that Justin Jefferson has been QB proof, and this scheme looked QB proof. It looked like it set everything up, and it's just not playing that way with JJ McCarthy. Yes, there's reason for hope. We talked about it in the QB video, and against this Bears defense, who is beaten up and quite poor, you can make an argument for it, but it's hard for me to push a player into the elite tier when we've seen just one 20-point game from Justin Jefferson all season. We're not getting the touchdowns. We're not getting the yardage. So, yeah, just like Justin Jefferson's spectacular. And, of course, you're never even going to think twice about starting him. But there's just enough of a little knock against him that's why he's where he is.
And then another player I want to touch on in this tier, Devonta Smith. He had a bit of a slow start to the year, but since then, he's just been putting up fantasy points. From week 5, he's been the wide receiver 7, averaging 18.6 points per game. He's outplaying AJ Brown, and it feels like he's the clear wide receiver 1 in this offense.
Yeah, this was the first week where I just didn't even consider like AJ Brown, it was just Devonta Smith is going up as the wide receiver one in this offense because he's given us results like that. And I think that it's been difficult for this offense in general. I mean, we talked about it in the QB video, but the way that they're dealing with the red zone, they're not passing into the red zone whatsoever, which makes it very hard for the wide receivers to pay off in a great way. And when they do pass into the red zone, it's going to Dallas Goedert. Like the deep throw rate from Jalen Hurts is something that's helped Devonta Smith. His deep throw percentage ranks second highest. So Devonta Smith has been getting there on big chunk plays. And over the last, since week 5, 19.4 points, 8.9, 13.3, 14.4, 16.9. AJ Brown in that period, 2 games under 10 points, 1 game under 15 points, and of course the one big blowout game of 28 points. But I can't trust AJ Brown, but when it comes to Devonta Smith, I know the role they have for him, and I know they're going to try and chuck the ball deep. And against the Lions, who another one of these teams who are banged up in the secondary, as we say about so many teams at this time of year, I think it sets up well for Devonta Smith to see plenty more downfield passing attempts.
Yeah, 100%. And one other player that I want to touch on, Zay Flowers, he had that monster week 1. But since then, it's been incredibly consistent, but just solid. He's averaging 11.4 fantasy points per game since week 1, but he has never broken 15 points. That feels almost slightly unsustainable. It's just 10 to 15 points every single week. There is no ceiling. Is this a Lamar thing or is this a Zay Flowers thing?
I think it's been an offense thing overall. Like the Ravens, just it's been up and down. Obviously, you had the games with Cooper Rush, you had the game with Snoop Huntley, and then Lamar comes back and quite clearly wasn't quite there. And then you have the game against the Vikings where the priority was to get the ball out as quick as humanly possible to negate the blitz. And then in the red zone, he's not earning targets in the red zone. And that was something I really hoped he would take a step forward with this year. But last time out against the Browns, he had 7 catches for 75 yards against them in week 2. So I think he's still very usable, but the hope of him becoming a superstar, definitely, it's like that candle's gone out a little bit.
Before we move into the B tier, though, if you haven't yet hit the subscribe button, you are missing out. Go ahead, hit that subscribe as we close in on 5,000 subscribers. In the B tier, we kick it off with DK Metcalf, followed by Stephon Diggs, Juwan Jennings, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jordan Addison, AJ Brown, Romeo Doubs, and Troy Franklin. Tom, DK Metcalf, some would argue he could sneak into that A tier. Why do we have him down in the B tier this week?
Yeah, it's just giving a little bit of respect to DJ Turner for the Bengals, who's been fantastic. Like, he has been shadowing top wide receivers each and every week, and it's really worked. Like, the guys going off against the Bengals' poor defense, it tends to be the wide receiver 2s on teams, and DK Metcalf isn't doing enough to justify pushing him higher. Like last time against the Bengals, he only had 5 targets, caught 3 of them for 50 yards, which, that's fine. 8 points, I guess, is okay, but it's not what we really want for a guy who should be so much higher. And DK Metcalf, he ranks 5th in the league in uncatchable air yard percentage. So much of the targets going his way, they're just not catchable. They're not good targets because Aaron Rodgers isn't playing that well. So, I like DK Metcalf for this game. The Bengals defense is poor, but it's going to take them doing something different for him to have a ceiling outcome.
Yeah, he's probably the player I struggle to rank every single week because I think his range of outcomes is so huge. His volatility is massive. And who knows where he could end up. So, yeah, I struggle week in, week out. One player who feels like starting to put it together, Juwan Jennings, obviously had the contract situation at the start of the year, then got injured, then had these bruised/broken ribs. But the last 2 weeks is looking healthy, is looking like he's the player, 3rd and Juwan that he was in previous years. 14.1, 17.1 fantasy points in his last 2 weeks. Do you think that Juwan Jennings could be that solid wide receiver 2 for the rest of the season that this offense we know can consistently produce?
I don't see why not, because I'm not expecting anything from Ricky Pearsall at this point. If Ricky Pearsall makes it back, if Ricky Pearsall actually is going to give us any kind of like run of him playing, then great. But Jennings hasn't dipped below a 22% target share over his last 4 games. And according to JJ Zachariason, he had a route participation of 90% on Sunday, which was his highest since week 7. No surprise, that coincides with his first game over 15 points since week 2. Now, the Cardinals aren't necessarily an easy matchup. The Cardinals have pretty good pass defense overall. They kind of rank middle of the table in pass EPA allowed. They kind of rank middle of the table in fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. So it's not one where I'd be scared of it, but it's not one where I look at it and I go, oh, this is a fantastic blow-up spot for him. But yeah, I think wide receiver 2 kind of territory, maybe wide receiver 3 some weeks feels like the bottom end of where you'd rank Jennings.
Romeo Doubs, I keep saying he's the consistent option in this wide receiver room for the Packers, but he did leave the game injured. At the time of recording, we're expecting him to play. He's got a great matchup, Tom. Do you think there's some ceiling there to go away with the solid reliableness?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, if he plays, you're starting him going up against the Giants. The Giants are just spiraling. Maybe they improve slightly with the kind of coaching staff changes, but the Giants have allowed the 12th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. Like, they rank 22nd against the pass. Like, each and every week, I want to start as many players as possible. And I think Jordan Love needs a bounce back here. The passing game in general for the Packers needs a bounce back here. And I'd be completely fine starting Romeo Doubs.
And then in the C tier, we do have Deebo Samuel, Quentin Johnston, Tej Johnson, Khalil Shakir, Tetairoa McMillan, Cortland Sutton, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Jameson Williams. Tom, let's start with Tet McMillan. I've been so impressed with him. He is an absolute superstar wide receiver, but the problem is his quarterback is abhorrent. Do you think that we can get enough from Bryce Young for fantasy success for Tet?
No, I don't. And we've talked about this in the QB video, but Bryce Young is just stinking up the joint right now. His yards per attempt is miserable. He's not been over 6.0 yards per attempt since week 6. He's not hit 200 passing yards since week 2. He's not hit 150 passing yards in his last 3 games. The Panthers, all they're doing is just leaning into the ground game because Rico Dowdle is just a monster right now. And Tetairoa, like, his target shares over the last 3, 43%, 31%, and 34%. It's great. Those are numbers that we want to see, but they need to be actual valuable targets. And if you're getting a large target share on a very small amount of passes, then that obviously is a lot worse than if you're getting a large target share on a lot of passes. So yeah, for me, it just feels a little bit too miserable.
One of the most miserable players so far this year has been Jameson Williams. He's been incredibly frustrating for fantasy owners in terms of you never know when to start him, you never know when to bench him. Some weeks he'll go off, some weeks he will do absolutely nothing. We've seen the change of play caller in Detroit with Dan Campbell taking over play caller duties, and we immediately see Jameson Williams pop up. Significant target volumes, being used in creative ways. Do you think that that's enough for us to feel confident in him rest of season, and particularly this week in what is an interesting matchup, should we say?
Yeah, going up against the Eagles on the road, 49.5 over-under. So you want to be able to start all your extra pieces to this game. And to your point, but even just expanding on it, like, this trend up for Jameson Williams started the week before. Like, over the last 2 weeks, his targets per route run have jumped. His yards per route run have almost doubled. His first read target share is up by 5%. So there's definitely been a coaching emphasis to try and put the ball in Jameson Williams' hands much more often. And I think that for now, he still needs to earn a little bit more trust, but as your wide receiver 3 or a flex play in a matchup like this, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, he's that boom bust player that could absolutely win you the week from the flex. If you do have any flex conversations where you're struggling to decide which one to put in, make sure you jump in the comments below. Tom and I will answer any of those flex, start sit questions, your trades, or whatever you just want to ask us, really. In the D tier, we do have Christian Watson, Parker Washington, Trey Tucker, and Jakobi Meyers. Tom, let's start with the Jaguars pair of Parker Washington, Jakobi Meyers. At the moment, we're expecting Brian Thomas not to play. If he was, would that drastically affect one of them, both of them? How would you feel?
Yeah, I'm just not expecting Brian Thomas to play. Like Brian Thomas, like on the back of Travis Hunter being ruled out for the year, Brian Thomas hasn't looked like he wanted to be there at all. So I can't imagine they're pushing him to actually start. The games feel fairly meaningless. Like I was very surprised that the Chargers opened up only as 2.5-point favorites in this one. I'm expecting it to be far more comfortable for them than that. But going back to these two guys, yeah, Parker Washington had the highest target share of a wide receiver for the Jags all year at 30%. He's been at least 20% target share in 4 or 5 games, over a 50% route share. Those numbers are all from fantasy points. Now, I trust him because I've seen this with Trevor Lawrence over the years. He wants to put the ball into the slot. He wants to put the ball near the line of scrimmage, and that's what Parker Washington's doing. I mentioned it last week, but when you watch him play, it's so reminiscent of Christian Kirk when he was out there. So I've got quite a bit more confidence in Parker Washington than I do Jakobi Meyers. I think Jakobi Meyers is going to be fine, but going up against this tough Chargers pass defense, I feel like it's probably more suited to a volume approach for Parker Washington than Jakobi Meyers, who might need to get there on a bigger play occasionally.
Yeah, I think, one of the best things of Liam Cohen as a play caller that we saw in Tampa Bay last year was the inventive screen game, the manufactured touches that he could get to wide receivers. And Parker Washington was the one who received those last week. Two touches in the run game plus a couple of screens. Like, he seems to be the manufactured touch guy, and that's kind of bankable. So yeah, I feel confident in Parker Washington this week, but I just don't know if there's much of a ceiling there for him. In the E tier, we have got Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Xavier Worthy, Darius Slayton, and Keon Coleman. Tom, Darius Slayton, is Jameis Winston week? Any interest there?
The obvious conclusion is to go, okay, Jameis is going to be chucking it deep down the field, and that's going to work out well for Darius Slayton. Darius Slayton's been fine this year, kind of what we expect every year. He's going to pop up here and there for the odd kind of bigger week, but in general, he's not going to be particularly reliable. He has had double-digit points in each of his last 2 games, but those were the first games all year where he'd been over 8 PPR points. Wan'Dale Robinson has had, about 6-7 different games where he's been double-digit PPR points. So it depends what you're looking for at wide receiver. If you're playing DFS, then Darius Slayton is probably the better play. If you are a massive underdog on the week, then Darius Slayton is probably a fine play. But playing the Packers defense, who've been pretty decent all year, I feel like I just don't necessarily want to lean too heavily into this game.
And then finally, in the F tier, we do have Malik Washington, Rashid Shaheed, Demario Douglas, and Jerry Jeudy. Any of those that you particularly like as a dart throw this week if you're searching for upside, Tom?
Well, Jerry Jeudy's kind of trended up. It seems to have really taken a long time, but there seems to have been an emphasis to get him the ball more. I think his target share last week was around 37%, and it was the highest target share that he'd had all season. It was one of those that we saw down the back end last year. They started force feeding the ball to him. Now, the Ravens defense has really picked up since over the last few weeks. They've been much better, but if the Ravens are 9-point favorites going into Cleveland, so if the Ravens have control of the game and Dylan Gabriel has to pass the ball a lot, then maybe there's an argument for Jerry Jeudy if he can get a touchdown or just there on volume. I'm still not expecting much from Cedric Tillman at this point, so maybe Jerry Jeudy is a little smidge too low, but on the whole, I feel comfortable enough with where these guys are.
Yeah, and that is it. Those are our wide receiver rankings. Do you disagree with anyone? Is there someone we've got too high, too low? Let us know in the comments below. And of course, if you want the other positional ranking videos, check them out in these thumbnails above.